Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. This is officially the first video we upload to our Cantico channel. Most of you will notice that the translation and dubbing is made with artificial intelligence. It's a little bit of a cheat, but we will try to do our best to improve as time goes by. The idea is to let you know our Cantico brand products and share with you all of the content that are already present on our Italian channel. You will find all the links to the channel and to the related contents in the description of this video. You will find a lot of Italian videos. Some of them already have English subtitles, but our effort is to translate them so you can hope you can enjoy them in your native language, or at least in a language that is more comprehensible than Italian. So enjoy this video. Let me know what you think about it in the comments so we can improve in the next videos that will come up and be as useful as possible to offer you new contents related to our hobby and our passion of good listening. Listening fatigue, I could understand it if we were, I don't know, in a mine. So maybe after a day of jackhammering, one actually experiences listening fatigue. I could understand it in an industrial environment. I could understand it, in short, if we are forced by necessity or by force to live in an environment pervaded by annoying noises, maybe even loud noises, at which point I can understand and share that one might experience listening fatigue. I cannot understand, however, why for several years now the concept of listening fatigue has often been correlated with hi-fi listening. Hi-fi, I put it in quotes because it really seems to me almost an oxymoron to talk about listening fatigue when discussing high fidelity. Where does this listening fatigue come from? When does this listening fatigue come up? Because it has not always been there. The concept of listening fatigue is a relatively young concept, or at least young, compared to the concept of high fidelity itself. I'm sorry, I always have to start from the time of Noah, as my grandmother used to say, when I make these speeches. But when high fidelity was young, that is, when the need for faithful listening was panned by, for example, cinemas, there was no concept of listening fatigue. If anything, there was talk of distortion, of sound not being faithful enough because actually methods were being developed to make the sound more like reality. Then at some point, something must have happened. What happened was simply the evolution of high fidelity into the nasty thing that we know today, or at least that we know today commercially. If you listen to an antique amplifier or even a very old one, there was a, I don't know if subscriber, or at any rate a person who commented to me on a video on the channel who said, but my old, I don't remember what amplifier it was anymore. Anyway, an old tube amplifier, can I think of it as having a similar tube sound? He was actually referring to the fact that his old amplifier had a sound that was still sweet and pleasant to listen to. It may not have been the ultimate in high fidelity, I know that one quite a bit more or less, and I know it's not exactly a grand that, but what I can guarantee is that with those items of listening fatigue, there is none. We can come up with 1,000 ankles, 1,000 issues to say that they are good, bad, better or worse, but basically they are devices that one can listen to for a day without having listening fatigue. This blessed listening fatigue has come up with the 0.00001% distortion, 100 voltage transistor and subsequent devices that have come along, maybe connected to a nice low efficiency speaker with the tweeters parked at 1,000. Why? If we investigate for a moment what causes this listening fatigue, we actually find out that it is basically good and good, indeed bad and bad, distortion in the mid-high range, no more and no less. What causes us that fatigue, that tense feeling here under our ears when we listen to certain systems is nothing but the fruit of this kind of listening, and maybe it has a considerable volume, because heaven forbid we listen at a decent volume, We have to pump it up. We have the watts. We let it all out. Result, headaches, then that feeling of compression in the muscles. You know, there are muscles in our outer ear here that in the presence of annoying noise automatically contract. That is, if we are in a very noisy environment, these muscles contract to close the ear canal and get less annoying noise to the eardrum and then to our brain. Here, these are the same muscles that stiffen when we listen to a bad system. Mind you, lousy from this point of view, that is from the listening point of view, a system that makes us have listening fatigue, or I would say rather annoyance. A classic of listening fatigue are systems with dome tweeters and silver cables, perhaps with a nice transistor power amp that never hurts. When you try listening to one of those systems, it becomes a challenge to avoid listening fatigue. However, I would like to clarify in this video that the presence of listening fatigue is not necessarily correlated with hi-fi listening. I came across a comment on a video where a user claims that by listening to more live music and avoiding hi-fi, they have managed to eliminate listening fatigue. It might seem like a balanced approach, but it raises the question of what type of music they were listening to in the first place. Based on my own experience and the feedback from clients and friends, I subject myself to various genres of music. Unfortunately, these moments are now incredibly rare. However, on the rare occasions when I do get the chance to truly relax, sprawled out on the couch or sinking into the armchair, with my feet comfortably in front of me and some delightful music playing on the stereo, there is one thing I most certainly do not want to experience: listening fatigue. I crave pure relaxation, where I can enjoy the music that surrounds me and perhaps lose myself in a captivating book. The last thing I want is to feel any sort of uneasiness or discomfort caused by listening fatigue. Instead, I yearn for something pleasant and soothing that will uplift my spirits and leave me in a state of tranquility. So, be cautious when you find yourself in front of a sound system and notice any hint of fatigue or even a touch of discomfort that weighs you down. Don't let your visual perception deceive you, as you might just be witnessing a remarkable sound system from another universe. However, at its core, this system is fundamentally flawed. It lacks the essence of true fidelity, regardless of its appearance as exquisite furniture or a symbol of wealth. I have expressed this sentiment countless times before, and it pains me that our language currently lacks the ability to differentiate between overpriced gadgets for playing subpar music and legitimate high-fidelity systems. Although they all bear the label hi-fi or high fidelity, it is imperative to recognize that an expensive or highly sought-after system can never compensate for the unpleasant and tiresome experience of true high fidelity. Let it be clear, such systems are far from meeting the standard of genuine fidelity. They cannot be considered as such. Of 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 euros undoubtedly, it is a matter of possessing a system that produces desired sound or a system that fails to do so. The pivotal aspect is that for many years, I would even go as far as saying, for decades, there have been pretend journalists and self-proclaimed reviewers who have been applauding a system so infused with intricate details that seemingly allows us to hear the faintest note of the violinist in the front row, when in reality, it could simply be an entirely random sound leveling of the system with a twitter boost by 6 to 10 decibels above the speaker's average efficiency. What are the consequences? It leads to the dreaded fatigue in our listening experience. If I were to fill my ears with a speaker that distorts the mid-high frequencies by 20%, and please note that I am not simply throwing out random numbers, certain dome tweeters, regardless of the exotic materials they are composed of or their impressive names, tend to exhibit this behavior when driven sufficiently. A little bit heavily have distortions of that order, and believe me, they are bad distortions when I put something like that in my ears. But what else do I want to experience but listening fatigue? By contrast, here, someone might rightfully object to this form of audio system, but I experienced listening to a high-efficiency system with horn tweeters instead of dome tweeters, and I must admit, it was quite bothersome. You might wonder what it was driven with. Well, if you've had the chance to watch any of my past videos, even recent ones discussing measurements, types of distortion, and how amplifiers distort, then you would have realized that not all amplifiers are suitable for driving high-efficiency systems. It is because a high-efficiency speaker itself has the ability to produce very little distortion, as we have already mentioned multiple times, several orders of magnitude less compared to free air speakers. However, if the amplifier used under normal circumstances is prone to heavy and ugly distortion, then we are faced with the same problem again. We will find ourselves frustrated by the amount of unpleasant distortion that we hear, leading to listening fatigue and making the whole experience rather burdensome. It is a rather simple matter to understand. Let me reiterate, please refer to my videos on measurements where I have explained this numerous times. Typically, transistor amplifiers or heavily counter-reacted amplifiers tend to produce a significant amount of distortion in a rather unpleasant manner at low volumes. When connected to a high-efficiency speaker, they will be forced to work at lower volumes, resulting in significant and bothersome distortion. On the other hand, when we take a high-efficiency speaker and connect it to a tube amplifier, one that operates very linearly within its proper working range, without excessive strain, the distortion is minimized, making the listening experience much more enjoyable. It becomes a straightforward and detailed reproduction that provides extensive information, real dynamics, and ensures a pleasant listening experience without causing fatigue. You might wonder why this is the case. It is because the distortions that I experience in this setup are significantly reduced, a quantitatively low level of distortion, which is considered good distortion. Although we have already discussed this in other measurement videos, it is important to highlight the distinction between good distortion and bad distortion. Good distortion refers to distortion with low-order harmonics in a reasonable amount. On the other hand, bad distortion includes anharmonic distortion or distortion with high-order harmonics. Even if the level of distortion is minimal, the presence of bad distortion can still be incredibly audible and annoying. Consequently, your listening fatigue can be attributed specifically to the distortion in the mid-high range, which is extremely irritating. Let me clarify further against a potential argument that some might raise, but my system claims to have distortion levels of 0 to 0.1% across the entire frequency range from 0 Hz to 20 GHz. I have already explained in other videos, without rehashing comments and going into unnecessary detail, that this issue cannot be solely evaluated quantitatively, but is primarily a qualitative matter. When distortion levels are low, it is certainly better for normal listening conditions, assuming we have properly functioning amplifiers that keep the distortion levels reasonably low. As such, the quality of the distortion that reaches our ears becomes immensely important and can make a significant difference. It is the distinction that separates a realistic sound from something that merely resembles hi-fi audio. Let us designate it as such. The diminutive video we created regarding the measurements of the €35 amplifier, possibly it was the most recent video or one of the earlier ones. It is fairly recent and you are able to proceed and view it. This specific amplifier, under specific circumstances, possesses minimal numerical distortion. However, when considering its quality, the distortion is so severe that even under optimal listening conditions and ideal operational circumstances, with a bench power supply, appropriate load, and resistive load, amongst other conditions, it still manages to distort quite similarly to the €30 amplifier we utilized, primarily because the flaws were quite apparent. Despite this, the outcomes are quite satisfactory for a €30 amplifier. Interestingly, these same issues and aspects can be identified in traditional hi-fi amplifiers, particularly in those that are more commercially popular. Hence, it is futile to inquire about my opinion on different brands, as the disparities amongst these devices are quite negligible and frequently limited to cosmetic alterations that are purely superficial. These amplifiers all employ circuit designs that operate in a parallel manner and yield analogous results. It is important to note, though, that when I mention they possess the same circuit, I am referring to their conceptual resemblance in terms of functionality and performance. Then there are those who are even more cursed and those who are slightly more bearable. However, fundamentally, it is incorrect targeting. These are circuits that have been designed in the wrong way. As for the reasons behind these choices, we have already discussed them numerous times, but to put it briefly, they are purely economic reasons. Now, at this point, I don't want to be the one causing exhaustion from listening. As usual, my videos often deliver unpleasant news to most people, and I understand that. However, when I come across certain posts and comments, I can't help but feel compelled to address them. Guys, if there is listening fatigue, it is not high fidelity. If you want to change hobby, you only do well. On the other hand, if you desire to achieve good listening, you must abandon the conventional notion of high fidelity with amplifier X, speaker Y, and so on. Don't be swayed by the advertisements in the newspapers unless your intention is to acquire mere marketing gimmicks. These objects have very little to do with quality listening, and honestly, as the years go by, they become less and less relevant. That being said, enough with the discouraging news. If you didn't enjoy this video or felt overwhelmed by the negative information or criticism of your system, I encourage you to show your support by liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel with the bell icon activated. Or send me directly to a place of damnation, for I am convinced that finding someone like me who shares the perspective of a Cassandra is not an easy task when searching through the sea of YouTube channels that discuss various topics. See you at the next video.